गुड आफ्टरनून ख़वातीन हज़रात, एक और अमेजिंग इंटरव्यू के साथ मुजाहिद उमर और आसिफ आपकी खिदमत में हाजिर हैं। यूट्यूब का ये मीडियम हमारे लिए एक वास्ता है कि हम आपके साथ दुनिया में किसी भी खित्ते में आप मौजूद हों, आपसे कम्युनिकेट कर सकें। आज हमारे इस इंटरव्यू में हम जिस शख्स का इंटरव्यू कर रहे हैं, ही इज ऑन द गिनीज बुक ऑफ वर्ल्ड रिकॉर्ड। ही इज द लॉन्गेस्ट सर्वाइवर ऑन डायलिसिस in the whole world. Couple of years ago, he was recognized by the Guinness Book of World Record, and still he is going on. His name is Brian Tocher. He was born in 1945 in South India, Bangalore. His parents were in the British Army, and they were in India. And now he has made and break the record of the longest survivor on dialysis. Today we are interviewing him in order to get all his experience, knowledge, and the experience that he has gone through to the attention of the rest of the people wherever they are in the world. I'm very thankful to Brian Tocher that he has given us that opportunity to interview him. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the longest survivor on dialysis in the whole world, the Guinness Book of World Record holder, Brian Tocher. Hello Brian, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much for giving us that opportunity to interview you in order to spread the experience of the dialysis, that you are now the world's longest survivor on dialysis. How have you done that?
By the grace of God and determination and willpower. I think these things matter in life. And if one has the willpower and determination, I think all things are possible.
Okay. Brian, tell us the early days of your life.
Well, I started dialysis. I was in the printing trade. I was a lithographer in my early days. And I noticed coming home from work, I'd have swelling in my ankles. And this continued for about 2 months. And for a short while I went into a hospital in Hammersmith, which was called, it's no longer there. It was known as the West London Hospital. Since then, I was there for a couple of weeks, and they got me on a diet, put me on a diet, and the fluid retention disappeared. But they said they're not specialists in this field, so they were going to put me in touch with a Professor de Wardner, who was in the old Fulham Hospital. They did, and I went to Charing. It was Fulham Hospital then. It's now Charing Cross. And I saw Professor de Wardner, and he told me, Brian, you're quite ill. Your blood pressure is sky high, so we're going to keep you in and see what we can do for you. And I was hardly there a week when my kidneys stopped functioning altogether.
After how long? Like you have this ankle swelling problem?
From 2 hours prior, 2 months prior, I'm sorry, 2 months prior. But in about 2.5 months, the kidneys just deteriorated to such an extent that it just packed up.
Packed up, all of a sudden?
Completely, yes. So they had no alternative but to put me on it's quite a primitive method. It was called CAPD, which is called peritoneal dialysis, where they put a catheter straight under your navel into the peritoneal region, and they fill you with these liters of fluid.
Okay.
And after about 2 or 3 hours, they drain it. If they put in, say, 3 liters, they take about 5 or 6 liters out. This is all the excess fluid that had built up in my body. Anyway, this went on for 2 weeks, and I really deteriorated. My weight from about 65 kilos went right down to about 45. So the professor was quite worried and thought, well, we got to try a different type of dialysis. So they said, we're going to put a cannula into your leg, which is an artery in a vein. There is a plastic tube. And through this means, we're going to dialyze you, hemodialysis, hemo meaning blood, through your blood. Anyhow, the first session I went on, it was rather mind-blowing, and I was very nauseated and sick. And this lasted for about 6 hours, the very first treatment.
In which year?
In 1966, in about July
July 1966.
Yeah.
Okay.
And since then, you know, then I started dialyzing for 14 hours, 3 times a week.
14 hours?
Twice a week. And then I did this till 1971, 1972. And then things started to improve. By then technology had kicked in. And they put me on a disposable. Before that we were using kidneys. They were called keel dialyzers, where one had to build your kidney, put membranes on it, cut it. It was a lot of hard work. But then they brought in these disposable kidneys, where you used them for 10 hours, 3 times a week, and disposed of everything, including the tubes, everything that one used. The only thing that was left was a monitoring system, which monitored what was going on. This went on for another 6, 7 months, maybe a year. And then they switched on to another dialyzer, which was very small, about 18 inches long. And this, but they weren't high flux. High flux meaning these took out middle molecules, which, that's why I'm suffering today with my bones.
Okay.
Well, in those days, the dialyzers weren't perfected enough to remove a protein called B2 microglobulin, which it's a type of protein. And continuously being on dialysis, what happens, this builds up in your, especially in your joints.
Okay.
And it could be quite painful. Plus the fact that, you know, later on in years that you just deteriorated. Like now I could just about walk. My shoulders, I've got much function there, so I have help in dressing and showering.
Okay.
But all in all, I think we've progressed immensely over the years. You know, thanks to the chap who pioneered dialysis, a chap, Mr. Professor Tocher, who's still alive, and a good friend of mine. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here to tell the tale, as it were, because he acted as a mentor to me, and he was a great man. I have all respect for Professor Tocher. He was the pioneer for the whole of Europe in this field. But since then, we've improved so much, you know, like
when
now.
Did you really experience the technology, the benefit? You were saying that before pre-1970, you have to go there for 14 hours a day, twice a week.
It was twice a week.
Twice a week, 14 hours.
You know, I was actually working, and I used to have time off, leave work at 1 o'clock, get in by 2, and then I'd be on the machine till 4 in the morning, and we'd come off the machine, they'd give you 2 hours sleep, wake you up at about 6, give you some breakfast, and off to work you went.
So you go to the work, you come back to dialysis,
Right,
and then
that's
you
right.
go.
You know, it was quite an ordeal, you know. But if one had to stay alive, and you had to work, you know, sometimes I don't understand why kids of today, they get kidney trouble, and they think this is the end of it. They're sick. It's not the attitude one should take. You know, you know, life is too precious, and one should try and get on with your life, and not, you know, think, okay, I've got this problem, and that's the end. It's not the end. You know, I have just proved to the world that, look, I've been on dialysis since 1966.
Strong determination keeps you going.
Willpower, like I mentioned earlier. You know, one has that. I think, you know, the world's your oyster, and nothing's impossible.
Okay.
And also by the grace of God.
Yeah. And now, up to today, how many years have already been you're in that?
Well, I started in 1966, like I said, and up to date I'm still dialyzing, but 3 times a week for 4 hours. But I go to Charing Cross Hospital because the old Fulham Hospital has been demolished, and in its place they've built Charing Cross.
Okay.
It's quite a modern hospital, and I find dialysis there. You know, the nursing staff and the doctors, they're quite attentive and very, very professional, may I add. And I've got no complaints against
What are your ups and downs during that period of time? 1966,
yes, you know,
now.
see, life hasn't been that smooth because I incurred a lot of mishaps. Like 25 years ago, I fell over damaged two of my bones in my neck, the fifth and sixth vertebrae. They just collapsed.
Okay.
So, I was immobile from more or less the waist downwards, which left me paralyzed, as it were. So I went to a hospital, and the nearest hospital